I've been a scientist in this field for nearly 30 years, and should I add fruit to my diet is a question I get asked a lot. The answer might surprise you. There are 5 points that I consider before answering this question for the individual. And I think you should ask yourself these 5 questions too. What's your actual goal? Does fruit sugar actually give you energy? Does fruit sugar damage my body at all? What does fruit sugar do to my appetite? What if I'm an athlete though? So, let's go. Question 1. What are your actual goals? Is it fat loss? Do you want your energy to be optimized? Is it mental clarity? Perhaps you have autoimmune problems. And, as mentioned, are you an athlete of some kind? Why does this matter? Well, you want your actions to be in line with your goals, don't you? How's this going to work? The next 4 talking points will help you decide whether fruit is right for you. So what's in it for you? Maybe you'll learn something about fruit that you didn't know that will help you decide whether fruit is in line with your goals or whether it's not. Are you ready? Let's talk about fat loss, energy, mental clarity as that regards fruit sugar. The first thing you need to understand, and I'll cover this chart here in a minute, fruit sugar lowers your energy in your liver. It encourages the production of fat, it encourages potential gout, potential inflammation, and drives excess hunger, not to mention the potential for a disease called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which can be fatal. Why does this matter? Excess fat production is no good if your goal is fat loss. Gout and inflammation are no good if you already struggle with autoimmune problems. The reduced energy status in your liver is no good if increased energy was your goal, obviously. Also, if your energy levels are compromised, mental clarity is less likely to be optimized too, isn't it? Finally, I've never heard of an athlete who feels like perhaps they need a bit less energy, maybe a bit more body fat, and possible gout and immune problems to deal with as well. Have you? Here's the mechanism. Let's deal with this chart here. Okay, what we're seeing here is a representation of a liver with a diagram of the metabolic pathway of the metabolism of fruit sugar, known as fructose. I've taken it from a scientifically published article. The reference is up on the screen there. If you want to go and read the thing and have a look through whatever, do that in your own time. Here are the take-home messages. How does fructose encourage the production of fat? Well, if you follow fructose from the top left hand there to fructokinase, fructose 1-phosphate and glyceraldehyde, down through to aldolase reaction and the triose kinase reaction, DHAP, etc. What we end up with is glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate at the bottom left hand of the chart. What's that? Well, that's a component of triacylglyceride, fat. So fructose gets metabolized directly, almost entirely, to fat, rather than providing any carbohydrate style energy to speak of. So that's the first thing. Okay. I spoke about gout and inflammation. Where did I get that idea from? Well, if you look at the rest of this chart, you'll see that the fructose to fructose 1-phosphate via the fructokinase reaction requires the use of ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell, in order to make that reaction occur. That leads to a reduction in the ATP concentration, a build-up in the ADP concentration. And if you build up ADP concentration, that would discourage the reaction from continuing in the forward direction. So what you have to do is clear the ADP out of the way so that more ADP can fill that gap, if you like. So how do we do that? Well, we take an ADP and another ADP, we slam them together, forming a new ATP and an AMP. Okay? Now, that reaction would be similarly discouraged if we allowed AMP to build up. So we don't. We have another reaction which deaminates, i.e. removes an amino group, NH4+, from the AMP, which turns it into something different called IMP to thus alleviate that blockade. Then we have to get rid of that. And how do we get rid of that? Well, that's the rest of that chart out to the right-hand side, which if you look at the very far right-hand side, at the tip of the liver there, you'll see that the end product is uric acid. So the intake of fructose encourages the build-up, or the production at least, of uric acid. And uric acid is thought to be causal in gout. Okay? Gout is an inflammatory process. So there's the inflammation part taken care of, I guess. So what have we got there? We've got the production of fat. We've got the reduction of ATP in the cell, not only there, but also down on the left-hand side at the triose kinase reaction as well. So none of those things can be good, can they, for increased energy, because the ATP is being dragged downwards, not built upwards. They're not good for mental clarity because of the energy situation. They're not good for the potential for the gout-forming products. Not good for the non-alcoholic fatty liver thing because we're producing a bunch of fat. We've taken too much glucose. That's the problem, in a nutshell, with the metabolism of a significantly large amount, anyway, of fructose. So, that said, what does all of that mean for you? Well, obviously, if your goals are fat loss, mental clarity, optimal immune function, optimal anything, really, then any significant amount of fruit, honey, table sugar, etc., any of those things that contain fructose might not be the best choice. There is at least one other really vital thing about fructose that's not covered on this chart that I think you should also consider before you make your decision about whether fruit is right for you or not, though. I haven't covered it yet, so let's get it covered off. Autoimmunity problems directly. How does that happen? Well, fructose is directly damaging to the tissues of your body if it builds up above a certain concentration in your tissues. Why is this important? Well, obviously anything with a serious potential to damage your body is probably best avoided if you don't need to eat it, right? How does it work? Well, you've probably heard all about how glucose sugar damages tissues if it builds up. The hemoglobin A1C or HbA1c test is a measure of this kind of damage to your red blood cells, specifically. Diabetics are told to keep a close eye on the level of damage, the A1C test. When you read the science papers, it turns out that while the level of fructose in your body is almost always a lot lower than glucose, fructose is somewhere between 7 to 11 times more damaging to the tissues than glucose is per molecule. That's probably worth knowing. Just a note on that before I move on. I've heard Paul Saladino claim that your HbA1c is fine, if your HbA1c is fine, then there's no significant fructose damage, as he believes for some reason that the HbA1c test also reads damage caused by fructose. Let me be clear. It does not read this damage. Paul is wrong about that. Why is this important? Well, the way that excess sugars damage our bodies is by chemically binding itself with our tissues, thus changing their shape, their function, and therefore, by the way, how our immune systems view our own tissues. With enough sugar bound to our tissues, our immune systems may well start to attack our own tissues. So that ties us back to the autoimmune problems again. So that's a couple of very serious issues with fructose already, isn't it? But let's dive in a bit deeper even. Let's dive in and see how fructose can affect hunger. You see what I did there? Back for a second bite? I thought it was clever. Oh well, never mind. The slippery slope. A little fruit really stays a little bit of fruit, does it? Why does this matter? Have you noticed how you might often say to yourself, I'll just have a little bit of fruit? But before you know it, you've slammed the whole plate of fruit, and then an hour or so later, you're famished again. I have in the past, in another life. Why does this happen? Well, remember, just a few minutes ago, we discussed how fructose drags the ATP concentration down. ATP, as we discussed, is thought of as the energy currency of the cells. Your liver is a vital organ, and it needs to remain charged for action. Fructose drains the liver's battery. The liver therefore sends a chemical message to your brain, and the message your brain receives is, put more food in! Quick! I'm starving! If you respond to that message with more fruit, you're only making the problem worse, aren't you? What does this mean for you? Well, if not eating too much food because you want to have less body fat is your goal, fruit might not be the best approach, might it? So, no fruit is ever required. You don't need any fruit in your diet ever. We know that fructose leads to a potential for increased fatness, potential for low energy, potential for overhunger, potential for overeating, potential brain fog, potential immunity issues, and potential gout and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. None of which is ideal if you're trying to be a competitive or even a semi-competitive athlete. Is it? No. Primarily, the argument we're going to talk about in a minute with athletes is this. Remember the left-hand side of that chart? Most fructose gets metabolized directly to a component of fat and not to glucose for exercise energy anyway. Okay? So, why is this important for you as an athlete? Athletes need carbs, you're told, which is true. You do need carbs. However, that's only part of the information. You can make your own carbs. You don't need to eat them. Many in the exercise communities variously tell their athletes, yes, you need to eat carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are a vital form of energy for athletes. Absolutely true, as I said. However, you just need to go and ask those people in the exercise community, have you ever heard of gluconeogenesis? They'll probably say, of course we have. It's insufficient, which there's no evidence for. I'll cover that in another video. The main point is that it's gluconeogenesis, not fructoneogenesis. This video is about fructose. Do you need fructose for exercise energy? Nope. It's going to drag your energy down and it's going to make fat, not carbs. Anyway, why is all of this important for you? There are arguments ongoing in the exercise science fraternity about whether certain mostly extreme endurance athletes need to eat carbs during performance to remain competitive at elite levels. This almost certainly does not apply to you personally unless you are an elite ultra-endurance athlete. This, as I said, is a discussion for another video. Even if you do decide that carbs are vital for you in your exercise or training, what you need to understand is that you do not need that carbohydrate to be in the form of fruit sugar. Fruit sugar is never required for exercise. Glucose is. Fruit sugar may increase the likelihood of overfatness, low energy, overhunger and overeating, brain fog, autoimmune dysfunction, gout, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Finally, as it says on the screen, if vitamin C deficiency is a worry for you, I'm going to get scurvy if I don't eat fruit, look out for my upcoming video explaining why you are extremely unlikely indeed to become deficient of vitamin C on a diet which contains only meat and fat. See you then.
Did you know your body renews and repairs itself using adult stem cells? Sadly, every year we release fewer of these adult stem cells. Isn't that terrible? Luckily, Stem Enhance Ultra reverses this trend by assisting stem cell release. Isn't that awesome? Here's where you can get it.